Hello, welcome to True Crime Talk. Today I'm going to be discussing the case of Thomas Richard Roche. He went by the name Tom. He went missing on September 13th, 1991. His body did end up being found. They confirmed it was his body through DNA, but his case is still unsolved because if he was murdered, nobody's ever been brought to justice for it. And if he committed suicide, they've never been able to determine that or prove that either. So this is a picture of Thomas and his girlfriend at the time he went missing. Her name is Barbara, or was Barbara Rondeau. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. They had been together for quite a long time, about, I think it was like 16 years, and they had lived together for about 8. He went missing in 1991 from Burbank, California. They had just moved, or had moved to California in 1988, so they've been there a few years at the time he went missing. So now I'm going to click on this article here from the Los Angeles Times. This article is from July 19th, 1992, and it says, "Man disappears, tragedy or hoax, mystery. He left a girlfriend, a new job, and his beloved Harley, but now police say letter from his purported killer may be true." So let's read this to see what they say at the time. At first, case number 91-10270 seemed like any of the dozens of missing person reports that come to police agencies in Southern California every week. Thomas Richard Roche was missing, having left his apartment without telling his longtime girlfriend and with only the clothes he was wearing. The 37-year-old machinist's new job and bank accounts were left behind. So too was his beloved Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Believing that his September 13th, 1991 disappearance might be temporary, Burbank police held the report for a few days while waiting for Roche to show up, as do most people whom loved ones have reported missing. But Roche did not turn up. Instead, a letter surfaced from a person professing to be his killer. And case number 91-10270 took on a unique light. "I am suffering a great deal of guilt right now about what I have done, and I feel it is necessary to write about it for my sake and yours," begins the unsigned letter mailed to Roche's apartment. "You don't know me, and hopefully you never will, but I am the one who killed Tom Roche." More than 10 months later, Roche remains unaccounted for. As time goes by, police are considering the letter as a possibly authentic note from a killer who wrote of a need to kill that he found difficult to control after serving in Vietnam. Either this is a legitimate disappearance and the person who wrote the letter had something to do with it, or Tom Roche disappeared on his own and had it done to cover his tracks. Detective Cliff G. Thiem said, "The more time goes by, the more credence I have to give to the authenticity of the letter. I have to look more strongly on the possibility that he may be dead." 6 days after Roche disappeared, the letter arrived at the Roger Street apartment he shared with his girlfriend, Barbara Rondeau. It was addressed to the family of Thomas Roche and contained a driver's license, credit card, and a piece of jewelry belonging to the missing man. Rondeau read the 2-page letter on the apartment steps near her mailbox, collapsing in tears before calling police. The writer described meeting Roche at a topless bar and planning to quickly and efficiently kill him after luring him to a prearranged meeting. "He fell for it, and we arranged to meet on Friday the 13th, the letter said. "I must assure you that it was neat and quick. I do not think he suffered at all." Police have not disclosed all of the letter's contents or its postmark, saying that the information is being withheld to protect investigative leads. Apparently, making a reference to Milwaukee serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, the letter said that news about Dahmer rekindled desires that the writer had suppressed since serving in Vietnam. I loved being in Vietnam. In fact, those were the happiest days of my life. I felt such a rush whenever I had a confirmed kill that it was hard to switch it off when I came back to the States. For 18 long years, I have held this in check despite the nightmares and fantasies about killing. This Jeffrey Behemer thing really got to me, and I wondered if I could still do it. Now, the police believe he was talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, but as you can see, this is how the person who wrote that letter spelled the Jeffrey Dahmer name. And of course, Jeffrey Dahmer starts with a D. I think it's Dahmer, but he spelled it Jeffrey Behemer. But the police, of course, still think that he was talking about Jeffrey Dahmer because Jeffrey Dahmer had just been arrested like in July of that same year for like 16 plus murders himself. So I figured LA would be the best place for what I had in mind. I did not want just a random thing cause you get caught that way, so I set up a plan. Thiem said the property contained in the letter and other references to Roche make it clear that the letter is not a prank. The person who sent it either had possession of him or his cooperation, Thiem said. It leads us to the quandary, is this for real? The detective said his investigation found Roach to be a man who was free-spirited, liked to ride with motorcycle clubs, and hang out occasionally at topless bars. Roach was described as a large, heavily tattooed man who knew how to handle himself. But Thiem said he had moorings such as a job, family, and possessions tying him to the mainstream. Thiem said Roach has no criminal record and was not a drug user. He deposited a paycheck in a bank on the day he disappeared. He had just quit one job as a supervisor in a machine shop and was scheduled to start a similar job at higher pay the next Monday. He had nothing about him that you would think would make someone run away, Thiem said. It is just one of those absolute no-clue things. He liked to hang out on the edge of society. There is always the possibility that being a wannabe, he tied himself up with the wrong people. Rondeau, 32, has steadfastly said Roach would not leave their home without notice. The couple grew up together in Rhode Island. They had been living together 8 years when Roach disappeared. Since his disappearance, Roach has made no contact with his 5 sisters and brother. In saying that Roach would not leave without notice, Rondeau realizes that she is giving credence to the letter. I don't want to believe the letter, but Tom wouldn't have done this on his own, she said in a telephone conversation from Rhode Island, where she recently returned to live with her family. He is an upfront man. If he had a problem, he would have just said, Barbara, I am out of here, and then gotten on his bike and left. The motorcycle for Rondeau and Roach's other friends is the most puzzling part of the disappearance. It was his baby, Rondeau said. He would never leave it. There is no way that he left on his own. Greg Sharp, a fellow motorcycle enthusiast, said he does not believe that his friend willingly disappeared. Why he would leave his motorcycle behind, I don't understand. But Sharp also called the letter Rondeau received a crock, saying that there are inconsistencies between the letter and facts about Roach's disappearance. He also said the letter would be disproved if authorities can confirm a sighting of Roach on the Saturday after he supposedly disappeared. I just don't think the facts of the letter really match the way he left, Sharp said. Meantime, Thiem said he has exhausted most investigative leads and the case has become a waiting game. In the 10 months since getting the report, the detective has sent flyers to police departments nationwide, entered information on Rocha into national police computer systems, and checked the coroner's office for unidentified bodies with physical descriptions matching Rocha's. Nothing has panned out. Working with police in the undisclosed city from which the letter was mailed has not produced a suspect. No usable fingerprints were found on the letter or envelope. Thiem said the next move may be Roach's. A body is found or he shows up somewhere, Thiem said. I'm waiting on the so-called magic phone call. There isn't much else we can do. For Rondeau, who calls police routinely for updates on the investigation, waiting for answers is difficult and frustrating. She said there has been no end to her pain. There are times and days and minutes that I feel that he isn't with us and the letter is true, she said. But I find myself looking at every Harley that goes by to see if it might be him. We just don't have any answers. Okay, so this article was from the Los Angeles Times, written July 19th, 1992. He went missing September 13th, 1991. And so his live-in girlfriend had moved back to Rhode Island, I guess, to be closer to family where she could get support. Maybe she was scared to live alone out there in California without him, especially after she got that letter saying that he had been murdered. The only one little question I have about that, I can understand, she's a woman living alone and away from her family in California, but if a loved one goes missing, and it was in July, it's several months later after he went missing and after she got that letter, but wouldn't you want to stay in the area in case he showed back up or something like that? But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, obviously, it could, financial reasons. She had to go back to Rhode Island with her family. She couldn't stay in California. So I'm not saying she's responsible for his disappearance. I'm just saying, just a question I have. Whenever loved ones move soon after a loved one goes missing, it always makes me think, do they know that that person's not coming back? Do they just assume that? They think that? Or do they know? Do they have knowledge that that person's never coming back? At this time, his body was not found yet. This was written July 19th, 1992. Excuse me while I took a pause because I thought his body was found in January of 1992. I'll have to find out. Let me read the next article. Okay, this article says it was written July 19th, 1992, but his remains were found January 11th, 1992. They weren't confirmed by DNA at that time, but his belongings were with them. But this article talks like, of course, his remains weren't found yet. So I'm not sure the discrepancy, maybe just because I didn't confirm it was him, but his items that his girlfriend said belonged to him were with the body. So I'm not sure. Maybe they got the date wrong on here because from what I can see online, his body was found January 11th, 1992. Not confirmed by DNA yet, but they had a pretty good clue it was his body because his belongings that his girlfriend identified were with it. So I'm not sure why this article written in July of 1992 talks as if his body had not been discovered in January 11th, 1992. But we'll read another article and maybe we'll get more information. Okay, this article says mystery surrounds missing man, letter claiming he was murdered adds to puzzle. Burbank, California. Police expected Thomas Roche to turn up in a few days, as do most people whom loved ones have reported missing. Instead, a letter came from someone who wrote of an uncontrollable need to kill. No sign of Roche 37 has been found, and police say the letter has proved more puzzling than helpful. I am suffering a great deal of guilt right now about what I have done, and I feel it is necessary to write about it for my sake and yours, the letter begins. You don't know me, and hopefully you never will, but I am the one who killed Tom Roche. Roche, a machinist, disappeared on September 13th, 1991, leaving behind his living girlfriend, a new job, and a cherished Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Either this is a legitimate disappearance and the person who wrote the letter had something to do with it, or Tom Roach disappeared on his own and had it done to cover his tracks, Detective Cliff Thiem said in a recent interview. But Thiem also said the passage of time increases the chances the letter is valid. The more time goes by, I have to look more strongly on the possibility that he may be dead, he said. Barbara Rondeau, who lived with Roach, received the letter at their apartment 6 days after he disappeared. The letter addressed to the family of Thomas Roach included a driver's license, credit card, and piece of jewelry belonging to Roach. The writer described meeting Roach at a bar and getting him to agree to meet later. He fell for it and rearranged to meet on Friday the 13th. the letter writer said. I must assure you that it was neat and quick. I do not think he suffered at all. He said his urge to kill Roche stemmed from his experience in the Vietnam War. Those were the happiest days of my life, the letter writer said. I felt such a rush whenever I had a confirmed kill that it was hard to switch it off when I came back to the States. This Jeffrey Behemer thing really got to me, and I wondered if I could still do it. Again, this Jeffrey Behemer, the police believe he was talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, because I guess they couldn't think of another killer who with a name close to that. He apparently referred to Milwaukee serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, whose murders came to light after his arrest in July of 1992. Police who have searched the country for clues into Roach's whereabouts would not disclose the letter's postmark and said no usable fingerprints were found on the letter or envelope. I'm waiting for the magic phone call, Thiem said. There isn't much else we can do. So it's pretty much the same information in the LA Times article we just read. And just to clarify, the previous article said it was 1992 that Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested, making it seem like the letter had been written in 1992. However, to be clear, Tom Roach disappeared on September 13th of 1991. Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested on July 22nd, 1991. So this was just before Thomas Roach had disappeared. Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested and his crimes were found out in July of 1991. Tom Roach went missing on September 13th, 1991. So this would have just been like over a month later that Tom Roach disappeared. And so Jeffrey Dahmer would have been fresh on everybody's minds. And that's why the police thought the letter was referring to Jeffrey Dahmer, even though it was misspelled by the writer of the letter. So this happened in 1991 when Tom Roach went missing and Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested previous to him going missing. So that's, you always got to double check any news media you read. You can't take their word for anything because there's always typos and misprints, and, they have mistakes in their news reports. And so it can be very confusing to try to figure out what's right and what's wrong. But for a fact, we know that Thomas went missing September 13th, 1991, and Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested on July 22nd, 1991 for his crimes. And then the letter that was received by the family of Thomas Roach, by his girlfriend at their apartment, that was just 6 days after Thomas went missing on September 13th, 1991. So 6 days after that, that's when she got the letter in the mail. Okay, so anonymous letter adds to mystery of men's disappearance. Let's see if this has any new information. The disappearance of Thomas Roach appeared routine until an anonymous letter surfaced from a person professing to be his killer. Police say the note has proved more puzzling than helpful. Okay, so it repeats what the other articles have said. See, Roach, a 37-year-old machinist, disappeared September 13th, 1991, leaving behind his longtime girlfriend, a new job, and his cherished Harley-Davidson motorcycle. So it's the same stuff from Detective Cliff Thiem from his previous interview, just a reprint of that. So this is a different newspaper that printed it. Let's see. The letter arrived at the apartment Roach shared with his girlfriend, Barbara Rondeau, 6 days after he disappeared, addressed to the family of Thomas Roach. The letter contained a driver's license, a credit card, and a piece of Roach's jewelry. And then goes into the same things that the previous articles talked about. Let's see. He had nothing about him that you would think would make someone run away, Thiem said. It is just one of those absolute no clues things. Rondeau, 32, says she and Rocha grew up together in Rhode Island, having lived together 8 years when he disappeared. Okay, so this is just a reprint of the previous articles. Thiem said police nationwide, including the undisclosed city from which the letter was mailed, have not produced a suspect. No usable fingerprints were found on the letter or envelope. Okay, so the letter that was sent to his girlfriend, there were no usable fingerprints were found on it. And the undisclosed city from which the letter was mailed has never, to my knowledge, even to this day, been named. They have released parts of the letter, but to my understanding, the whole letter that she received has never been released, and the city which it was mailed from has never been released. And I think after this amount passage of time, police should just release everything that they have, because this case can't get no colder, and I don't believe it's going to hurt anything at all if they just release that information. I mean, release everything that they have. Maybe there's like one or two tidbits of information about the crime scene or where his body was found that they could hold back if if they are holding back anything about that, so that only the killer would know in case they do get a suspect, and that's how they want to catch them or figure out if he's really knows what he's talking about when they're interviewing him, if he's the one who did it. Let's say if somebody confessed to it, how they would. But at, this happened in 1991, so at this point, they should just release everything, release the full letter, and release what city the letter was mailed from, and just anything else they have, because it could only help at this point. It wouldn't hurt anything, in my opinion. This case isn't going to be solved if it hasn't already been solved, unless more information gets out to the public, and the public, somebody remembers something or says something or turns somebody in who they know who was involved in this. Okay, now this article from AP News says July 20th, 1992. So let's see what this article says. Police expected Thomas Roche to turn up in a few days, as do most people whose loved ones have reported missing. Instead, a letter came from someone who wrote of an uncontrollable need to kill. So this is the same information as the other articles, where it talks about what the killer said in his letter. And it talks about Detective Chris Thiem. So there is no new information in this article about this case. Okay, so to review the facts that we do know, Thomas Roche went missing September 13th, 1991. His remains were found about 4 months later, 500 miles away in Placer County, California. His remains were found January 11th, 1992, and there were items belonging to Thomas Roche that his girlfriend identified as being his property, so that's how they knew it was possibly him. However, they did not get the final DNA results until I think it was 1994, confirming that it was indeed Thomas Roche. Now, the cause of death that they have for him was a single gunshot wound. However, all they had at the time were bones, and I don't even think they found his full set of bones, so I don't know where the gunshot was. Was it in the head? Maybe that's information that they're holding back in case they catch a suspect or whatever. But I don't know. And maybe if you know where he was shot, because they say he died of a single gunshot wound. Well, how do they know that? What was there, a skull with a single gunshot wound to it? Or was there something like on a rib cage where they knew that a bullet had nicked his rib cage or a bone somewhere in his body? Like he had been shot through the heart and there was like a bullet wound or were there bullet casings found in that area? He was found like down a hill off the side of a road. Were there bullet casings that they found that they knew that he had been shot? And to my knowledge, there was not a gun found at that scene where his body was found. So that's how they know that he was murdered, and they don't think it's a suicide at all, or is there still a possibility it could be a suicide? Because he could have went there and shot himself, but they would have found a gun unless his bones had been moved and they just didn't find the gun. When I say his bones moved, like by animals or whatever, because they didn't find his full set of remains. So what bones did they find? Could the gun had like floated off in a rainstorm or a flood? It's probably far-fetched, but could an animal had toted the gun off that he had killed himself with? Because he'd been laying out there 4 months. Animals move bones and clothing. Could they have, perhaps, I don't what kind of gun was used. Could an animal have removed a gun if he did commit suicide? So I guess the police are pretty sure it's a murder, or by what the information that they have and investigating the crime scene, they think he was murdered, as far as I know. When he first went missing, they did think it could be a suicide and that he had either written the letter or had somebody write it for him, that maybe he planned his disappearance and ran off. Maybe he was, going to commit suicide. But once his body was found, and as far as I know, a gun was not found with his body, that's made them think, well, it definitely has to be a murder, as far as I understand this case. And just to give an idea of where he lived and where his body was found, this is Google Maps, and this is Burbank, where he and his girlfriend were living in an apartment. And his body, news article states, was found about 500 miles away in Placer County, California, which is up here. So you can see you can get there a couple of ways, but this is the I-5 route to get there. And that's about 438 miles. So and about the same amount of miles this way. But anyway, so his body was found way up here, and he lived down here. So did he travel up here himself, or was he traveling with somebody from Burbank? Did he meet somebody up here and was killed, or somewhere along the way was he killed? Or was he killed in Burbank and then his body taken all the way here and then dumped on a hillside up here in Placer County? This is the letter that the girlfriend received. It says, "The family of Tom Roche. I am suffering a great deal of guilt right now about what I have done, and I feel it is necessary to write about it for my sake and yours. You don't know me and hopefully never will, but I am the one who killed Tom Roche. I cannot and will not go to jail. I could never handle it. I almost lost my mind. Never again. I loved being in Vietnam. In fact, those were the happiest days of my life. I felt such a rush whenever I had a confirmed kill that it was hard to switch it off when I came back to the States. For 18 long years, I have held this in check despite the nightmare and fantasies about killing. This Jeffrey Behemer thing really got to me, and I wondered if I could still do it. I figured LA would be the best place for what I had in mind. I did not want just a random thing because you can get caught that way, so I set up a plan. I met Tom in a strip joint in the valley and got to talking. He fell for it, and we arranged to meet on Friday the 13th. I must assure you that it was neat and quick. I do not think he suffered at all. I am very sorry for what I have done, and I know in time that the guilt will leave me, so will your pain." So this is the letter received by the girlfriend at her apartment on September 19th, 6 days after Tom went missing. Remember, the letter had like a credit card in it of Tom Roach's, his driver's license, and I believe an earring of his. So whoever wrote the letter definitely had access to Tom Roach's property, if nothing else. He had his driver's license, his credit card, so it means he probably had his whole wallet and his earrings. So he had to have gotten them from Tom Roach unless somebody gave those things to him. So let's look at this letter here. Well, first off, it's interesting. They plan to meet on Friday the 13th. That you know, did the killer do that on purpose? Just because it's Friday the 13th. Is he a psychopath? Uh, One thing about this letter is that it talks about let's say we'll just call him the killer who wrote this letter, assuming that it was really written by the killer of Tom Roach. Let's say, for argument's sake, it is a legitimate letter from the killer of Tom Roach. He would have to be a psychopath, because I can tell you from my own personal life experience that Vietnam veterans, at least the majority of them, do not like to talk about their experience. Most war veterans don't, whether World War II, Vietnam, Korea, so forth, don't like to talk about their experience in the war, in battle, in combat. So this guy seems to like revel in it and glorify it, which means, well, if he's a psychopath, he could have been a soldier who enjoyed killing if he's a psychopath. So maybe this is a true letter, and this is how he truly served in Vietnam and he truly enjoyed it, and then he felt the urge to kill again. Maybe he is a killer, a serial killer, psychopath, whatever. But that's just something odd that most people in Vietnam don't like to, talk about it. But of course, if he's a serial killer, a psychopathic serial killer, he would like to talk about death and destruction and murder. It says I cannot and will not go to jail. I could never handle it. I almost lost my mind. But he doesn't say he's been in jail before. He says I cannot and will not go to jail. It doesn't say I cannot and will not go back to jail. I could never handle it. It doesn't say I couldn't or didn't handle it. I almost lost my mind. And this sentence is where it sounds like, oh, he's been there before. But in these sentences, it doesn't sound like he actually has been in prison before. You know what I'm saying? It's like whoever wrote this may not be telling the truth in this letter. It says, I cannot and will not go to jail. I could never handle it. Then say I couldn't handle it or I didn't handle it. I've been there before. It says I could never handle it. To me, it sounds like he's telling like in the future he couldn't handle it. I almost lost my mind. It kind of like just to me these are inconsistent sentences and statements in this letter that would make it seem like he's lying, that the person who wrote this letter is not being truthful in this letter. It says, I am suffering a great deal of guilt right now about what I have done, and I feel it is necessary to write about it for my sake and yours. Well, that is pure 100% BS. Because, first of all, if you're a psychopath, you have no conscience and you don't feel guilt about anything or remorse. And later in the letter, he's talking about how he enjoyed killing in Vietnam, but now he has guilt for killing Tom Roach. That is not how it goes. That is not how it goes. If you are a psychopath, you have no conscience. You don't feel guilt. That's why a psychopath is a psychopath. You do not feel guilt for murdering Tom Roach, and you don't feel guilt for what you did in Vietnam if you're a psychopath. It says he felt a rush whenever he had a confirmed kill in Vietnam. But now he has guilt about killing Tom Roach in California. That to me makes this letter seem fake, like there's not truth in this letter, that a lot of what's written in this letter is lies. And remember, according to information I have read, this is not the whole letter. This is not the full letter. But like I said before, this was 1991 that this crime happened, so they should just go ahead and release the whole letter and what city it was mailed from. Like, he lived in Burbank. Tom Roach lived in Burbank. His body was found in Placer County, California. Was the letter sent from Placer County, California? Was it sent from Burbank, or was it sent somewhere in between? We don't know because, to my knowledge, they have not released that information, which is stupid at this point in time, in my opinion, since it's been so long. I mean, the case is so cold, it can only get warmer by releasing information, in my opinion. It can't get no colder if they release more information. But anyway, so to me, this letter doesn't seem like the writer is speaking truthfully. It doesn't mean that he didn't kill Tom Roach or know what happened to Tom Roach, he or she. It just means that it's just a bunch of BS, in my opinion. Um, and like whoever either killed Tom Roach or at least wrote this letter about killing Tom Roach isn't a good speller or doesn't read the news media well or can't, because Dahmer doesn't sound like Bahamer or Behemer to me. Boy, duh, as in dog. I mean, how could he not know Jeffrey Dahmer? I mean, he could misspell Jeffrey like he did. He put an extra E in there, I think. I think Jeffrey Dahmer's, has two E's, not three. But then Behemer. I know Dahmer's, you could spell it maybe, I think it's Dahmer. You could misspell it Dalmer, Domer, something like that. But why Behemer? It's like you put three E's in Jeffrey and three E's in Behemer, trying to spell Dahmer. But the police, are sure that he was trying to speak of Jeffrey Dahmer. I can't think of another killer that he could be speaking of with a similar sounding name. So I guess, it is Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer, like I said, had been arrested like in July 1991, and this happened in September 1991. So I assume the police are correct in that he's speaking of Jeffrey Dahmer, but, the spelling, I mean, so a question I would have how did Tom Roach spell? Was he a good speller? I know people think, well, if he was murdered, how could he write a letter? His girlfriend would recognize his handwriting if it was him. I understand that, but I'm just throwing it out there. If he committed suicide, did he somehow write this letter? And that's another thing. I believe it was handwritten, but could he have written it with, like if he was right-handed, could he have written it? If Tom Roach wrote it, could he have written it with his left hand or something like that to throw off people who knew him, like his girlfriend when he sent it to the apartment, so she would not know it was from him? I'm not saying Tom Roach wrote it. I'm not saying that he committed suicide because, like I said before, police said he died from a single gunshot wound, and I haven't heard of a gun being found near his body, so obviously that's not suicide. But I'm just throwing out all possible theories out there. And another thing I have is, what if Barbara Rondeau, the girlfriend, wrote it? I'm not saying she had anything at all to do with his disappearance or murder, but you just have to look at all theories. And a lot of times it is those closest to somebody who are responsible for their deaths or who are involved in their deaths. Could she have written this letter and disguised her handwriting so police or her family and the rest of Tom's family wouldn't know that she was the writer of it? Or could she have had somebody write it for her if somebody else was in on it? And I'm not saying his girlfriend had anything to do with it, but you got to look at all avenues of investigation, because a lot of what we know about Tom Roach is from her view, what she said. And if you've ever seen the TV show Unsolved Mysteries about this case, of course she seems very, distraught about his disappearance. But, there have been other people on true crime shows who seemed distraught, but they ended up being the ones who, actually murdered the person that they were talking about. So you never know. So I hope at the time that police looked at all avenues and looked at her too. This was back in 1991. I'm sure police knew to look at everybody, but could she have been a, very good actress? Could she have, somehow been involved, know what happened to him, but did this big elaborate cover up to draw attention away from herself or whoever really did it? Did the police make sure she wasn't having an affair with another biker? Because Tom Roach, they enjoyed riding Harley Davidsons, and they were in several, different bike clubs, and they would go as groups and ride around California and stuff. Could she have been having an affair? Could Tom, have been having an affair and she got jealous? Or could somebody else have been jealous about Tom, like another husband or boyfriend of somebody who he was having an affair with? Stuff like that. Did police investigate all that kind of stuff? I haven't heard anything about that. From everything I've heard, Tom Roach was a really good guy and hardworking. Could they have gotten in a fight and his girlfriend Barbara had shot him, and then somehow she got rid of his body before she went back to work? Like, in other words, could they have gotten in a fight the night before and then she went to work, acted as if nothing was wrong, and then came home and said that he was missing, and then, set up the scene for the cops. But, that's, I just have to throw that out there. But there's no evidence or indication from any reports I've read that she had anything to do with this death. As far as I know, she was very devoted to him and loved him and missed him terribly. But the only, like I said earlier, the only question I have, she did seem to leave California kind of quick after he disappeared. But if it was after his body had been found and she knew it was his body, then of course why would you stay in California? But if it was when he was missing before his body was found that she decided to go back to Rhode Island, well, it could have been for moral support from her family. She didn't want to be alone. She was scared, or financial reasons. But it just that's the only thing is when loved ones leave the area of where their loved ones go missing so quickly, that just sets off a little tiny of a red flag for me, because in a lot of cases, when somebody goes missing from an area, family members who don't live in that area will move to that area just so that they can be closer to that area and search on their own and stuff like that. Or they will stay in hotels for a long time to be in that area to help in searches and to search on their own when, this police stop searching. So that's just, there's another case I'm going to do in the future that where a mother moved from the area that her daughter went missing from and was found dead from like 5 weeks after her daughter went missing. So it always kind of draws a red flag for me, because I think, well, you know, because in a lot of cases, people want to stay in the same home or the same area in case their loved one comes back. They don't, especially a child. So a case I'm going to do in the future, it involves a child who went missing, was murdered, and her mother left the area in like 5 weeks after. So that seems a bit soon to me, but well, not only did she leave, but she got remarried and left. So I mean, that's just I mean, life goes on, but that just seemed a little quick. But maybe she got remarried, or her husband worked in another state or something. I don't know. But I'm gonna do that case in the future, and I'll try to see if I can find the answers of why the mother left the area so soon, because it is an unsolved case. So anyway, this letter, just a lot of things in it don't make sense to me. Like, I don't think whoever wrote it is being truthful in the letter. So if they're lying about one thing in this letter, they're lying about a lot of things. But obviously, this letter was sent to her, to Barbara's apartment on September 19th, 6 days after Tom went missing. This was before his body was found. So obviously, whoever wrote this letter knows that Tom is dead. Unless it's just some hoaxer who has heard about Tom being disappeared and decides to play a cruel joke. But that couldn't be true either, because how would he have his license, his credit card, and an earring if he wasn't the killer or somebody who knew that Tom was dead or what happened to him? So that's, my thoughts on the letter. I, I, I don't know exactly what the writer of the letter is trying to do, but it doesn't seem truthful. Like what he's saying is not truthful. But maybe it is just a random serial killer who didn't know Tom before. He did meet him at a strip joint, a topless club, arranged to meet with him, and then got him to go somewhere with him and killed him for the heck of it. But that would be more like a serial killer, and a serial killer would not have any guilt about it, and he would only write a letter to mess with the family of somebody, because some serial killers enjoy playing with loved ones and family members and the police. But this letter was not to the police, it was to the family of Tom Roach. And I think it's a load of BS. I'm not saying the person who wrote the letter didn't kill Tom Roach. I'm just saying the letter, he's lying about feeling guilt, and he might even be lying about Vietnam service and other stuff. So that's what, made me possibly, was it a staged letter written by Tom Roach to commit suicide? Was it a staged letter written by Barbara Rondeau, the girlfriend, to cover up or to throw the police off or something? Or like a boyfriend of Barbara if she was having an affair or, something like that. The letter just doesn't make sense to me, but of course, killers don't make sense most of the time. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about two sightings. The police have talked about two sightings they received from witnesses. When they questioned any potential witnesses, a neighbor came forward who claimed to have seen Tom talking to an unidentified white male at approximately 9:30 a.m. on the day he went missing. Tom was seen standing and talking to the man while looking into the bed of a brown pickup truck. So supposedly, if it's an accurate eyewitness account, a lady who lived near them said that at about 9:30 a.m. she saw Tom standing with another white male looking into the bed of a brown pickup truck and talking. And she told police that both men were just talking, not arguing, and it appeared to be a normal conversations. Detectives were unable to determine if Tom Roche had been the victim of foul play or had simply left voluntarily of his own choice. So if this witness account is true, but it hasn't been verified by another person, like in other words, only one person has given this account. So it wasn't, not other people, to my knowledge, did not see this, but this lady reported that she had seen him talking to somebody near or looking in a brown pickup truck. So detectives thought at the time that maybe Tom Roche had willingly left with that person, either voluntarily to just for a day or something, or to go do something with him. Who knows what the man's story was, what story he gave Tom Roche, and then he got him away from his home and killed him. So if the person who wrote this letter just wanted to kill somebody randomly, that's, he just lured Tom away. I don't know, like, let's go somewhere and I'll show you my motorcycle, or let's, go here and do this or that or whatever. And Tom was off work because remember, he'd started a new job that next Monday. So he was just enjoying his time in between his jobs before he started his new job. And so he didn't have to go to work. So maybe he just took off with this man. He thinking he'd be back in an hour or two, didn't know that he would never come back. So that's one witness sighting. Another witness sighting was that an employee at a motorcycle parts store said that Tom had come into the store on September 14th alone. As far as he knew, Tom was alone in the store. September 14th is the day after his girlfriend said that he went missing. So if he went missing on the 13th, on September 14th, if he was truly in a motorcycle parts store, then that would mean that Tom could have intentionally went off without telling his girlfriend Barbara, that he was leaving. Now, it doesn't mean, and to all indication, he would not have done something like that. He would not have left her without telling her he was leaving, or like went on a couple of days out of town without telling her where he was going, what he was doing. He wouldn't just leave. So if he willingly went off on the 13th, on the 14th, he ended up at a motorcycle parts store. But remember, he did not have his vehicle or motorcycle with him. He had to be using or was with somebody else. Maybe they weren't in the motorcycle parts store with him, but he did not have his own motorcycle or vehicle with him. Those were left back at the apartment. Him and Barbara were sharing a vehicle at the time. So the employee at the motorcycle parts store said Tom had come into the store on September 14th, the day after he went missing. He said Tom, who he knew, had been acting strangely because the two men usually joked with one another, but on that day he seemed more withdrawn. So that, would make me think, oh, could Tom had been maybe feeling down, depressed, suicidal? That he was acting differently, acting oddly. Maybe he felt guilt for leaving Barbara. Maybe he did intentionally run off or leave. He just did, and for whatever reason was unhappy, or maybe he wasn't thrilled with his life or happy about starting his new job the next Monday. Maybe he was going through a depression. But, how did he get there? And when his body was found, why wasn't a gun, to my knowledge, not found near his body to indicate suicide? Because police said he died of a single gunshot wound. So, how could he shoot himself if there wasn't a gun around his body? So, that, again turns toward murder, not suicide. So, the police think that maybe the motorcycle parts store employee was mistaken about the date of the incident. Like they believed his story, but they thought maybe he was wrong about the day he had seen Tom. So, so this was before Tom's body was found. But then, 4 months after Tom had vanished on January 11th, 1992, police in Placer County, California, which was 500 miles north of Burbank, were called to investigate a report of bones fragments discovered on a remote hillside. There were also numerous personal effects found at the site, including a duffel bag which contained a flashlight, hunting knife, an empty prescription bottle of medicine, 2 pairs of prescription eyeglasses, a boot, and several shirts. So this made it seem like Tom had a bag with him and was like going on a trip, or was intentionally went off to go somewhere that day. Doesn't mean he planned on staying away the whole day or overnight, but he did have his flashlight, hunting knife, and it says an empty prescription bottle of medicine. I don't know what prescription it was, but that, to me could be like, oh, did he go somewhere in the woods or remote area to commit suicide and took some pills and then shot himself? But we can't say that because a gun was not found with his body apparently, and apparently the police are sure he died from a single gunshot wound. So why the empty prescription bottle of medicine, I don't know. But he had his eyeglasses with him, which is normal. If you need eyeglasses, you take them with you. A boot and several shirts. Why several shirts? Was he planning on staying away several days? Was he going to call? Did he leave like with somebody who he thought was a friend, and he was going to call Barbara later and say, I'm here doing such and such. I'll see you in a few days. I don't know. Or was he going to help somebody work on a vehicle or motorcycle, and so he took several shirts in case he got dirty or greasy and needed to change shirts? I don't know. So the weathered bones were later DNA tested and positively identified as belonging to Tom Roche. It was determined he had been killed by a single gunshot. I sure hope they're correct about that. I guess, you can't make that kind of mistake. A gunshot wound is obvious, I guess. So I hope the medical examiner didn't make a mistake, because there have been cases where medical examiners have made mistakes in the cause of death. But I guess a gunshot is clear to see. So I assume it doesn't say in his skull, but I would assume maybe a gunshot wound to the skull, but it doesn't say. And maybe they're holding back that information in case they catch a suspect. Only he would know exactly where Tom was shot. Because of the personal items found, police believe Tom had planned a trip with his killer, who drove them 500 miles north before murdering him. The author of the letter was never traced, and the person responsible for the death of Tom Roche has never been apprehended. And Barbara, his girlfriend, passed away in 2010 at age 49. I don't know what she died of, but she died in 2010. So approximately like 18 or 19 years after he died, she died. Okay, my personal theory on this case, since a gun was not found at the site of his body, I don't think it was a suicide, obviously, because you can't shoot yourself in the head or wherever he was shot without having a gun close by. So I do think it was murder if the police are correct about everything. So I think he was murdered. But I think this letter that his girlfriend Barbara received 6 days after he went missing is total BS. I think the writer in this letter is lying about most things he's writing about in this letter, other than that he knows Tom is dead, that he killed him or had something to do with his death. I believe that's true. The person who wrote this letter is the killer of Tom, or definitely knows about it. So I believe the writer of the letter is the killer, but I think the reasons the killer gave in this letter are complete BS. I think this letter was written to throw off police, possibly to even throw off Barbara if she had nothing to do with it, to throw her off the trail. I believe it's somebody close to Tom. Somebody close to Tom, and possibly if Barbara had nothing to do with it, close to her, somebody in their lives, like a biker friend or a coworker of one of them, or somebody at Tom's old job might have had a grudge against him, or maybe, was a biker too, a biker in like a different kind of, even though, Tom wasn't a criminal, but maybe like a enemy biker gang or something like that. I believe this letter is complete BS. This is not, this killer didn't just pick Tom and kill Tom for the heck of it. He killed him for a more personal reason. I don't believe it was a thrill kill, joy kill type situation. He killed Tom because he wanted to kill Tom, and he had a reason. In other words, like he was angry with Tom on a personal level. And Tom did have some conflict with coworkers at his old job. Remember, he was leaving his old job to go to a new job. He got hired as a manager at a new job. I believe, if I remember correctly, he was turned down for a promotion at his old job, and that's when he decided to find a new job, and he did. Was somebody at his old job mad at him? Did he get in like a fight or just a verbal argument with somebody at his old job when I don't know if he got angry or just disappointed that he did not get a promotion. Tom didn't get a promotion that he wanted, and he felt like the person who did get the promotion was not deserving, or just got it because he knew somebody or something like that. If I remember, I think it's the Unsolved Mysteries episode I saw that in. Was somebody at his old job upset with Tom? Did Tom say something that made somebody angry at his old job? Was there a dispute going on when Tom didn't? I mean, Tom ended up, getting another job. He was leaving. Obviously, he quit that job and found a new job. But was somebody at his old job upset with him? I hope police investigated that. I hope police investigated people in Tom's life on a personal level, whether coworkers, biker friends, neighbors, and even his girlfriend Barbara at the time, to just rule out all suspects. Because I believe whoever wrote this letter is completely lying in this letter. They may not have even ever served in Vietnam. They're not guilty about it. In other words, they may feel guilt, but they would only feel guilt if this was, the first time they ever killed anybody. And like, they're not like a psychopathic killer. They killed Tom for a personal reason, and now maybe they have a tiny little bit of guilt, but I doubt they really even feel any guilt. But I don't think they're a serial killer. To my knowledge, no other letters like this were received, no other murders like this happened. I mean, there's a lot of murders, but the police or family members didn't receive letters after murders like this. So if somebody was really, writing letters like this after they committed murder, they wouldn't stop. That there would be other cases like this, and this killer would write other letters either to police or family members to taunt to people. I mean, to let people know what he was doing, his handiwork. He would, brag about it or talk about it again. So this letter is complete BS. I don't believe this is a serial killer or a joy killer who served in Vietnam and got off on killing people there and then decided to pick out somebody 18 years later and kill him. This was somebody in Tom's life who knew him on a personal level and had a grudge against Tom for some reason, and this letter was to cover it up. Now, the only thing that makes me think, oh, whoever wrote this letter might have had a little bit of guilt was that he did indeed put stuff in the envelope to prove that Tom was dead. This at the time she received this letter, they just knew Tom was missing. They did not know that he was dead. Did this person want the family to know, want Barbara to know, want the police to know that Tom was dead? He didn't disappear. He is truly dead. But this letter is just to throw off, what's written in this letter is just to throw off police. It's not true. It's to have police think that some crazy psycho killers out there, crazy psycho Vietnam vet, is going after people for the thrill of it and then sending a letter to the family. That is complete BS to me. I hope the police saw right through this letter. I don't think they did at the time. But this letter is, the person killed Tom, but what they wrote in this letter is not the real reason for it. It wasn't a joy kill. Somebody killed Tom because they knew him personally and they were personally mad at him. Who in Tom's life was mad at him? Who had a grudge against him? Did the police look at um, everybody in his life? Did they look at his friends, co-workers, biker friends, his girlfriend? And there's no evidence, or I've never read any reports that he was having affairs with other women besides Barbara, but did he have other women in his life? They need to look at every avenue, or they should have at the time. I hope that they looked at every avenue and investigated every avenue like that. I, when he first went missing, they thought he would just show back up. They thought, oh, he's a biker. He's just a free spirit. He'll show back up. And it was when they got this letter that they had to take it more seriously, because the letter was not only um, sent, but it had his personal items in it. So they had to take it seriously. So they knew something else was up. But of course, before his body was found, they think, well, could he have did this himself? Did he have somebody write this letter? And because he personally disappeared and was just, personally ran off, and he's doing this to cover his own tracks. But with the personal items in his letter, and then what was written in this letter, they started to think, well, he might really be dead. So then when his body was found, okay, they knew he really was dead and murdered. But did the police really think that this letter is the truth? Hopefully not. Hopefully they can see through it like I think I can. I think it's complete BS. I think whoever wrote this letter was lying in this letter to cover up that they were closer to Tom Roche than they say in this letter. And they wanted to throw police off. That is my view. What are your views? Do you think this letter is a load of crap like I do? Or do you think this letter was actually written by a psycho killer who just had the urge to kill and chose Tom and then just went on and never wrote another letter like this? He might have killed somebody else, but he didn't write more letters. I mean, somebody who writes a letter like this, who is actually telling the truth in this letter, would not stop. They would keep on until they died of natural causes or were caught. I think maybe the Jeffrey Dahmer case and then other cases just gave this person who wrote this letter the ideas to put what they put in this letter. There may be, soldiers who are psychopaths who enjoy killing, but those soldiers are already psychopaths before they go in the military. They don't become psychopaths in the military. They already have that inclination. They already have a lack of conscience. Nobody with a conscience would enjoy killing anybody. Nobody without a conscience would feel guilt for killing somebody, like this writer of this letter said. And if he gets off on shooting people in Vietnam or anywhere else, he's not going to have a conscience. He's going to be a psychopath. So I think this letter is complete BS. It's just so obvious. It seems obvious to me, but I'm not an expert. But I hope at the time this happened in 1991, I hope the police saw this letter and said, well, this is to throw us off. Let's look at people who were close to Tom. This letter is trying to turn us in another direction, because I guess the killer knew that his body would eventually be found, or they wanted, Barbara to know that he was dead and not coming back. You know. And so that's my theory, is that this letter is BS. It was somebody close to Tom. Now, whether Barbara had anything to do with it, I don't know. I don't think so, because she seemed so truly distraught over his death. But because she had gotten upset, did she love him more than he loved her? They got in a fight. She shot him and then felt bad and was distraught over it. And then she worked out this elaborate thing so she wouldn't, get in trouble for it and could go back to Rhode Island to be with her family and just, forget all about this. I don't know. That's just a theory I have. I think it's more likely that it's somebody else, not Barbara, in his life, but it's somebody close to him, because whoever wrote this letter is lying. And why would you write this letter and lie unless you were trying to cover your tracks and you wanted to throw police off? So it had to be somebody in his life. But the problem is there's so few news reports that I can find about this case, and the Unsolved Mysteries didn't go into great details. That's a TV show, and so they only show, bits and pieces of a story. So you don't know. I can't find, did the police look at people in his life? Hopefully they did. I mean, police, investigators aren't idiots. It's not the first crime they've ever had to work on. I'm sure but did they realize that they could be, um, did they realize that somebody's trying to fool them? Hopefully they did. I mean, cops aren't idiots. I'm sure, you know, but it just makes me wonder, since this case hasn't been solved and I can't find any news reports about any suspects or any I'm not family members, but family members, friends, biker friends, former co-workers of his. I can't find any news stories about anybody else being looked at. So I hope they just didn't look at this letter and think, oh, this psycho killer is out there and he killed Tom. I hope they looked at Tom's close circle of friends and family and co-workers, because I believe that's where the killer is. That's where they would have found the killer, I believe. So anyway, that's my theory on it. What are your thoughts and theories about this case? It happened in 1991. It's a very cold case. A lot of the people in his family are dead, so I don't know if, there are people still out there trying to help this case be solved, but hopefully either through DNA evidence on this letter or from his crime scene, maybe one day the police can get a suspect.